So welcome everybody to this series, webinar series for the Community's Ocean Action on Ocean Acidification. My name is Bronte Tilbrook. I'm co-chair of this Community of Ocean Action and will be moderating today's session. I'm based in Hobart, Tasmania, and I share the co-chair role with Peter Custodianship, who will talk shortly. Our role as co-chairs is to evaluate the voluntary commitments that have been submitted and their progress towards meeting the Sustainable Development Goal 14.3 target on ocean acidification. And our role also includes encouraging and facilitating new ongoing commitments to SDG14. And this webinar series is part of the effort to aim and encourage links across the community and provide communication among the many voluntary commitment providers. Peter and I also need to recognise the contributions of key people, including Stephen Screen, Kirsten Asensi and Catherine Stewart at the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, and Trevor Eggs from the International Atomic Energy Agency. And these people do much of the heavy lifting to organise the effort around. And we also need to recognise the important contributions of the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs who coordinate all efforts for sustainable development. So the whole team is really pleased that you could join us today. Before we commence, there's some housekeeping. Please mute your microphone if you're not talking. We'll have a short question session towards the end of the webinar, and you can type questions in the question box on the website, and the chat can be used to share additional information if you wish. Let us know if you have any additional problems. And this webinar will be recorded, and while there's a limited time for questions, again, we'll attempt to answer any questions that we get to in the webinar. And if you connected to the meeting and registered, you'll get an email with the web link and answer any questions. So anyway, thank you all for joining, and let's start. So it's now a pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Peter Custodianship. Peter is a co-chair of this Community of Ocean Action, and he's section head of the International Atomic Energy Agency Radiology Lab in addition to being a research oceanographer with the US Geological Survey in Santa Cruz, California. Peter's talks on voluntary commitments submitted to date on ocean acidification. So thank you, Peter. Can you unmute? I think there's a
offline.
Yeah, there's a technical
I'm afraid Peter's offline.
On Peter's side.
Yeah, so maybe we can try to get him on in after the next speaker and move on with Roshan. I'm very sorry about that.
Sorry, everyone. There was a glitch just before 5 minutes before we started, and Peter's having trouble connecting. So we'll move on to the next speaker, Kirsten Asensi and Catherine Stewart are going to provide a joint talk. Kirsten is again from the International Oceanographic Commission, or IOC, and the IOC have carried the SDG14 Kirsten's a program specialist with IOC, and she focuses on carbon sources of sinks and changing marine environmental conditions, and in support of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And Catherine is a consultant on ocean acidification at IOC. So they'll provide an update on the work within IOC and developments in submitting data to the voluntary process. Thank you. You're muted.
Sorry, Kirsten, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, helps to unmute sometimes. So welcome everybody, and I'm sorry for some of the technical difficulties. However, I'm very happy to speak here in front of you and to share this presentation with my colleague Katharina Schow. We will give you some concrete updates, what is also part of a voluntary commitment, and this is ocean acidification global observation to attain the UN SDG target 14.3 and its indicator 14.3.1, what to measure and how to report. Next slide, please. So, I mean, I'm probably speaking here to the choir, and you're all very aware of that. But in 2015, the UN agreed on 17 objectives to transform our world, and this is also why we all submitted our voluntary commitments. And within that, there are those 17 goals, and goal 14 focusing on ocean-related issues. Next slide, please. And as you all know probably, goal 14 reads conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas and marine resources for sustainable development. And under that, the UN agreed on 10 targets, and target 14.3 focuses on minimizing and addressing the impact of ocean acidification, including through enhanced scientific cooperation at all levels. However, this is a target, and how do we actually measure progress towards that? Those voluntary commitments are one part of that, so that we really address it from all different angles. But to see how countries address it, the UN and in particular the IAG, and I will explain a little bit more what that is, agreed on the indicator 14.3.1, which reads average marine acidity measured at agreed suite of representative sampling stations. This is something it was thought that it's kind of doable for countries and for scientists to measure, and for that, of course, it's still a phrase, and behind that there is a methodology which we will present here a little bit more, and this methodology is now tier 2, means that the UN agreed that it's conceptually clear, that the methodology is established and standards are available, but data are not regularly produced by countries. And indeed, this is still true. We still miss many countries in the world reporting towards this indicator. Next slide, please. And IOC is custodian agency for this indicator, means we are responsible for the reporting and so on, but we are not only custodian agency for 14.3, but we are also custodian agency for 14.A, which relates to the increased scientific knowledge, research and technology for ocean health. And so those two are very much interlinked, and I think it's a good combination to enforce ocean acidification science and observation capacity. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we are custodian for this at IOC for this indicator. But what does that mean exactly? So we were tasked with the duty to develop internationally agreed standards, or look out for them, coordinate the indicator development, and support increased adoption and compliance with the internationally agreed standards at the national level. So supporting countries really to measure and report according to the methodology. We have to then collect those data from countries through our IOC member states. And then, of course, because the capacity is not always there also in the data management side, we have to make sure that this capacity is increasing all over the world. Next slide, please. And so the first part was really this methodology development, and there I just have to give a big shout out to COA-OA and related experts, because they helped and they continue to help to revise and to develop this this methodology since 2017 actually. And now, as said, we are tier 2, so we are conceptually conceptually clear and the methodology exists. However, there's a big push that we need to go to tier 1, and we will try this at the end of the year with a revised methodology with increased member states participation. And this is also only true possible thanks to the experts which are part of our networks, which are part of COA-OA, and which help us to really go in the right directions. Next slide, please. And so what we are doing as well from the custodian agency here is like we are not we support it and we develop further the methodology. We are also collecting the information, and then we bring that back to the UN, and Katarina will later give some examples how this, for example, looks like. But especially this, when we go to the national reporting, the step between the methodology and the national reporting requires a lot of work from us to support that, but also, of course, from the individual scientists and from the individual countries and their oceanographic data centers or national commissions. Next slide, please. So I want to make a point here really on this, who contributes to this SDG indicator data collection. And I know that there are a lot of countries, a lot of voluntary commitments also really focus on the contribution to the observation and to the data collection related to that. And so it is in theory a national, and not in theory, it is a national duty as well to report. But of course, if there's no capacity, if there are no measurements, countries can't report. So we, for the data collection, we follow 3 paths, and this is due to the fact that different countries have different organizations in their science and observation, and so we try to go via IOC member states. However, they quite often don't have the information right at hand. Then we also go via the National Oceanographic Data Centers, who sometimes have the data, but sometimes they have the data but not the relevant metadata, which are necessary to really make sure that we compare apples with apples and not with oranges when we try to make global regional comparisons. And then we also go via the COA-OA network, because this is one of our main stakeholders here in this effort, the scientists in the COA-OA network. So we are contacting them at least once a year so that they can submit their data. And then like that, we can also go back from the scientists to the national commissions or to the National Oceanographic Data Center to facilitate that communication. And so this, and though we pull out this call once a year, submissions are open. We are open to submissions throughout the year, and Katarina will now really go a little bit more in detail how to do that and what are the different parts of the methodology and how we try to make our data comparable. Next slide. And now it's Katarina.
As Kirsten mentioned, I will be taking over and I'll give you a bit more of the details into this methodology. As you've heard, it's not just a piece of paper. This methodology comprises of the methodology text, which has the explanations and definitions, the data files, the metadata file and instruction, the SDG portal, which I will talk to you about a bit more in a minute, and SDG-based trainings and workshops for ocean acidification capacity development. The text of the methodology provides guidance on definitions for the different variables, on units, the rationale for inclusion, the computation method, and it gives instructions on how to build your own sampling strategy, including the frequency needed in your particular ecosystem. It also provides methods and guidance to countries on how to compile data at national level, It has links to best practices, which are community agreed. It has links to the standard operating mechanisms and measurement data quality guidance. So all of these are in there, including collection process, how to visualize data, and what the quality control mechanisms are for this data sets that you will collect. There's 3 data quality levels in this methodology, which have been adapted from the GOA-ON requirements book, which you can find on the GOA-ON website if you'd like to take a look. Category 1 is climate quality, and that's used to determine trends in the open ocean, on shelf and coastal waters, and provides data on seasonal to interannual variability on the regional scales. This is quite strongly defined by the exact standard that is permissible, the standard uncertainty that's permissible, sorry, for each of the 4 measurable variables. And as you can see, they are listed here for pH, total alkalinity, DIC, and PCO2. This category 1, this climate quality, is currently achievable only by a limited number of laboratories, and it cannot be achieved by all parameters, for all parameters, even by the best of the autonomous sensors. The second category, weather quality, however, this is more suitable for many coastal and nearshore environments, especially those where a lot of other activities happen, such as upwelling or pollution, freshwater impact, that can cause large variability. So that's important. And there, again, we have very clear definitions on the standard uncertainty that is permissible for each of these variables. This precision, so the second category, the weather quality, could be achieved in competent laboratories and can also be achieved with some of the best autonomous sensors that are currently out there. The third category of quality are the measurements of undefined quality. And these are basically all of the remaining measurements that haven't been mentioned so far. And in particular, we count among those the measurements with glass electrodes, for example, because there's still quite a bit of difficulty with using glass pH electrodes in seawater. These category 3 data is very useful for countries which are building their capacity and are aiming to have data of category 1 and category 2 measurements in the future. So this already gives you an indication of what is happening in terms of ocean acidification in the measurements that you're taking. These measurements will also be presented. They will be included in all data visualization products, but the data themselves will not be visualized. So we're not going to give numbers, it's just going to be absence of presence. And all of those contributing to the SDG 14.3.1 are encouraged to adopt or to aim for in the future measurement quality category 1 or 2. In order to facilitate the collection of data towards this SDG indicator, we, together with the IODE, have set up an SDG 14.3.1 data portal, and the address is linked up here. And this data portal, as you can see, gives you a bit of an introduction to the indicator, to the story behind it, as Kirsten has already laid out, and gives you an overview of where we've already collected data. And the darker these points, the more data has already been received from these locations. Additionally, we have several tabs here in the blue line, which give you instructions, FAQs, my data sets, and data. And you can access all of those once you've signed in with an Ocean Expert name. Sorry. The data label, for example, this one, allows you to look at all of the data that has been submitted, all of the data sets that have been received, and to download these, and to also search through these. So you can search by title, by platform category, whether it's mooring, whether it's ship-based, or by platform country. And we're currently working on adding more searchable variables in here so that hopefully you'll be able to search by pH or by DIC. We have recently added an FAQ section, which is based on the frequently asked questions by all of the community members who have participated and by all the researchers who have participated in data submissions so far. And we hope that this helps to make this as user-friendly as it can be. As Kirsten said, as the custodian agency for this indicator, the IOC has to report back, or is tasked with reporting back on an annual basis to the United Nations. And part of that is a text and visualization of the data received, which is then published in the Sustainable Development Goals report. What you can see here is the data that we have submitted for the 2020 report. That was the first the data received through this SDG 14.3.1 data portal. And you can see here the minimum, maximum, and average pH per year shown on this axis, as well as all of the calculated pH data. For this year's report, which is going to be published later this summer, we have also submitted a similar figure, again, calculated pH values based on data submitted to the portal. And the blue crosses here are the average, the green are the maximum, and the orange the minimum pH values. And I'd like to point out that there's a lot more variability, which is also based on the fact that we have received a lot more data sets, including a lot more coastal data sets. So there's some of that in there. We have also, as Kirsten already alluded to, received data from a lot more countries this year than in the first year. And I would like to point out that although there are quite a lot of countries that are in blue, indicating that we have data that was reported in accordance with the SDG indicator, we also have quite a few gaps. And we're hoping that this will in future be, a bluer map. The good news, however, is that in the 2 years since we have started this data collection process through the SDG 14.3.1 portal, our numbers have gone up from 8 countries in the first year to 30 countries that have submitted data and the attached information, the metadata. So this has in part been done by training, because we have raised the knowledge about this SDG 14.1, SDG 14.3.1, sorry, and because we have so many partners, including GOA-ON, who actively support this initiative, this indicator. Outside of that, we're also currently have a GOA-ON proposal for the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, which is called Ocean Acidification Research for Sustainability, or OARS in short. And the aim of this project is to provide society with the observational and scientific evidence needed to sustainably identify, monitor, mitigate, and adapt to ocean acidification from local to global scale, and this is crucial. There's a few of the key components, which include enhancing collaborative efforts on a regional basis, the coordination of capacity building and science, a co-design and implementation of observation and research to address this threat of ocean acidification, and to become better at communicating and delivering the outputs to policymakers and communities. And with this, I thank you for your attention, and I will pass over to the next presenter. Bronte, I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
For those people that couldn't hear me, I hope you can hear me okay now. And we have a few questions. We're running a little behind time, but I just wanted to point out that the IOC and IAEA efforts on getting this information, we started from about 4 years ago with virtually nothing, and it's been a remarkable development in how to report data and around the world. And so the next talk is by Peter Trzynski, who is from the section head of the International Atomic Energy Agency's Radiology Lab in Monaco, and he'll be giving a snapshot of the voluntary commitments that have been submitted already and some of the progress that's been made. So thank you, Peter.
Great, thank you very much, Bronte. I have to first apologize. There was a little bit of a technical hiccup here, and I was hoping to set the stage for Kirsten and Katarina by giving first kind of an overview. But as you just saw, Katarina and Kirsten gave a really nice presentation on some of the details related to the reporting mechanisms. What I'm hoping to do in my talk is kind of step back a little bit, set the stage for why these community of ocean action for ocean acidification is so important, and then provide just a snapshot, quick snapshot of where we are today and kind of shepherding these voluntary commitments along. Katarina, I will rely on you to move things forward, but you've already seen a lot of my team, heard from a lot of my team. Bronte and I are co-focal points for a community of ocean action on ocean acidification. And we have a strong team with Kirsten, Katarina, and then in Monaco at the IEA was Trevor, Carolina, Husty, and then Lena Hansen, who's now also in Monaco, but at the foundation. Next, please, Katarina. So what I thought I would do in the first couple of slides is to set the stage. And we all know how important the ocean is, and getting the ocean data and information and interpretations correct. Well, we have fantastic advocates for ocean science, and I just wanted to highlight 3 of them, but I certainly could highlight many, many more. The first one is my boss, Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, and I'm going to present just a quick snapshot of his speech just earlier this month from the Petersburg Climate Dialogues. Next. And I would like to preface this by saying our UNSG is really a fantastic advocate and promoter for climate science. So just a couple of highlights here. Last year was another unprecedented period of extreme weather and climate disasters, and our CO2 levels in the atmosphere again rose to a new high, almost 150% above pre-industrial levels. And this is the highest it's been for 3 million years, when the Earth's temperature was 3 degrees hotter than it is today, and sea levels were some 15 meters higher. And we all know what percentage of the population is close to our coastal environment, so you can imagine this is something that is affecting all of humanity. Next. Last year, we were 1.2 degrees hotter than at pre-industrial times, and very dangerously close to the 1.5 degree limit set by the scientific community in Paris in 2015. Next slide, please. We stand indeed at the edge of an abyss, but we can avert the worst impacts of climate disruption if we act now. And I think this is a common message that all of our strong promoters and advocates of ocean science have, that the underlying message is that we are certainly at the brink of missing, not being able to act in time, but we can still make significant improvements if we act together. Next, please. All right, so now moving across the Atlantic, this is John Kerry, the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate under the Biden team, and he came to Monaco and presented to me what was a very compelling speech in March 2021 for Monaco Ocean Week. And I just have a couple of excerpts I would like to share. Next. Ocean stewardship and climate stewardship are really 2 sides of the same coin. So we need to get away from these silos. We can not protect the ocean without confronting the climate crisis, and greenhouse gas pollution is already having a devastating effect on the ocean, which is quite literally dying from impacts such as warming and acidification. We cannot fight climate crisis without the power of the ocean. The ocean is a source for sustainable climate solutions. A lot of energy is going into this. And this last point, I think, is particularly interesting in that we're looking at the possibilities of the greatest economic transformation the world has seen since the Industrial Revolution. All right, now moving on to, I think, the last advocate that I will bring up here, and probably our best coach for communities of ocean action. This is Ambassador Peter Thompson, the Special Envoy to the Oceans for the UN Secretary General. I'm sure all of you have heard him speak. He's incredibly articulate and even poetic and on point in driving home the importance of all the work that you guys are doing here. So these are just a couple of take-home messages from a couple of months ago from the World Ocean Summit. I sum up our overall predicament with corals. In the IPCC 1.5 special report states with a very high confidence that 99% of our coral reefs will be lost when we go through the dreaded level of 2 degrees warming. Next. Coral reefs, as we know, are home to 30% of marine life. It's an understatement to say that their loss will have major consequence for the health of the ocean. And at this point, remember that we cannot have a healthy planet without a healthy ocean. Our predicament is that we are heading to a destination, not heading to a destination of 2 degrees warming. Instead, we're heading to a temperature increase of 3 to 5 degrees by the end of this 21st century. This is a direct quote from the head of the World Meteorological Organization. So if that isn't a call to arms, I don't know what is. Next, please. We organized ourselves around the Community of Ocean Action in March of 2020, and from that, Peter Thompson asked us to help him write a letter to the UNFCCC and COP26 for the Ocean Climate Nexus. And in this letter that is now on the internet, I just wanted to show you 2 highlights as it pertains to this session. The first one is, due to excess CO2 emissions, the ocean is acidifying at the fastest rate in history of the planet. And it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, for many ocean ecosystems and species to adapt to such rapid change. Solutions to the great 21st century challenges of climate change and biodiversity loss will become much clearer to us if we can view them through the ocean's blue lens. Next, please. And his positive message here that we're all connected, and I just wanted to highlight this connectivity between all of us with 2 things. Over the last year and a half, we've certainly all had to face unprecedented new situations related to coronavirus. But on the right-hand side of the slide, I wanted to show this image of the CO2 atmospheric concentrations from a global perspective and how interconnected the CO2 is on a global scale. And so you can imagine, if you're an oceanographer sitting on a boat somewhere and you're trying to measure CO2 concentrations, and put this in the context of how CO2 is changing, and see how complicated this is. Next, please. Okay, so now moving to our communities of ocean action. I wanted to put one slide in because we hear a lot that we're on this road towards Lisbon for the next 2022 Ocean Conference. And I wanted to set the stage. So in 2015, all the UN member states adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and Goal 14, conserve and sustainably use the oceans, was highlighted as one of the 17 SDGs. Next, please. So in 2017, in New York, we had our first UN Ocean Conference dedicated to SDG14. This was hosted by Fiji and Sweden. And from this, 1,400 plus voluntary commitments were introduced. Next, please. And so from that conference, we were supposed to have a UN Oceans Conference every 3 years, and we've temporarily had to place this on hold because of coronavirus delays. But in the interim, there are very important, a whole series of very important conventions and meetings at fora that are happening, such as, for example, the CBD COP in Kunming, the UN Food System Summit in New York, UNEA in Nairobi, and the UN, of course, the UN Decade for Ocean Science, IOC, is hosting for Sustainable Development, and the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration. And then in November, we have the UN FCCC COP26. And all of these, I think, are very crucial in leading us then to the 2022 UN Oceans Conference in Lisbon, hosted by Portugal and Kenya. Next, please. So some examples of, now focusing in a little bit more, some examples of the ocean acidification communities of ocean action, voluntary commitments. These voluntary commitments target 14.3, but obviously a lot of them are integrally connected to SDG 13, which is climate. Addressing target 14.3 requires the following 2 actions. We need to attempt to minimize or address the impacts of OA through management and policy actions, and we need to provide for enhanced scientific cooperation at all levels. And some of these two have been touched upon already by my colleagues in the previous talk. And below that, I just have an example, I won't go into this, of what a recorded result and impact from a voluntary commitment on OA would look like. Next, please. So here's a global snapshot. We have, I think, to date around 277 voluntary commitments that address 14.3. Of those, roughly 3/4 are indirect and 1/4 are direct, either only dealing with OA and primarily dealing with OA, which is just some semantics, but you can see we have already 277 of these. Next slide, please. If you look at how these are distributed on our globe, I think it's interesting to note that the South Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, South Pacific, North Atlantic roughly have the same amount, slightly less in the Arctic and in the Southern Ocean, which kind of makes sense, but there's roughly an even distribution, and it certainly shows the benefits of some sustained investments in OA. Next, please. All right, so this is the voluntary commitments on ocean acidification that could relate to other SDG targets. And I won't go into each one of these, but obviously 14.A, increased scientific knowledge, is the most abundant. And you can see here as you go down to the other ones. But this shows the interrelation between the various targets for SDG14. Next, please. So I have one slide to kind of give a quick overview. Roughly of the 20 OA voluntary commitments that were submitted in 2017, of which 40% are direct voluntary commitments. Next, 50% of these are due to end before 2021. 40% of the voluntary commitments have been submitted progress reports already and have been successfully implemented. So that's very encouraging. Most progress reports for commitments are pending, and less than 20% of the submitted VCs have deliverables post 2020. On the right-hand side, you can see a quick graph, the big infusion of voluntary commitments in 2017. But there's still an influx of voluntary commitments, and what we're hoping to do is generate some more energy and excitement about getting some new submissions for the voluntary commitments. Next slide, please. So progress on deliverables, and I can run through this relatively quickly because Kirsten and Katarina have shown this already, but the OA Alliance and the Ocean Conservancy continue to develop ocean action toolkits and work plans. Oops, sorry about that. Sorry, I'm not seeing the screen anymore. Can you hear me?
Peter, yes, we can hear you. It's progress on deliverables. It's a map of where the OA data is being submitted for the data port to the data portal. So
Bronte, if it's okay with you, can you take over for me here? I will stay on, but I'm having a hard time with my screen now for some reason.
Okay, thanks, Peter. So the point of this slide is to show that there's the regions that are where data have been submitted to the data portal for SDG 14.3.1. There's been a new addition of an Arctic hub to the network, which continues to organise meetings and seminars. And as Katharina indicated in the last talk, that there are now 30 countries reporting each year, up from 8 in the previous year. So it's growing. There's still plenty of opportunity for continued growth. And there are a number of training workshops being conducted, including in West Africa and the Western Pacific. And to date, there have been over 750 participants in training workshops on ocean acidification around the world, focusing on developing country scientists. Thanks. Next slide, please.
Bronte, if you'd like, I can take over again. So,
Thank you.
Yep, with this slide, I just wanted to show what we've learned so far. And on the right-hand side, I have an excerpt from a recent report, but just some examples of reported results and impacts from the voluntary commitments on ocean acidification. And on the left-hand side, I have some examples. So measures to address and minimize impacts on OA include development of these action plans. And as was just mentioned, the OA Alliance now has 15 OA action plans for local and national governments that have been put forward to include both local adaptation and mitigation options. And many of the voluntary commitments also address capacity building, such as trainings, technology transfer, education, and awareness raising. Next slide, please. I have one slide to kind of show the breadth of the reach of the OA ICC with all of its partners, as capacity building was just mentioned. And you can read for yourself, more than 800 capacity building opportunities involving close to 750 scientists from more than 100 member states have been engaged to some level or another on ocean acidification. This is from the inception of the OAICC project in 2012 and with all of its partners. So it's been wonderful to see the global community get engaged on OA science and all other forms of activities related to ocean acidification. Next slide, please. So for next steps, challenges. We've all been through a tough, year and a half, and now we've had hardly any in-person meetings, and we've had to come up with new ways to reach our partners and collaborators and stakeholders. Next, in terms of opportunities, well, we've also learned over this last year and a half that there's new ways of bringing people in with these virtual meetings. Next, innovative remote learning and networking tools have been developed and are being implemented. We have learned that we have actually reduced the carbon footprint, and there's been a rebound to speak of in some parts of the natural world. We can highlight OA success stories. And the OA Africa Hub, for example, is a fantastic success story related to that. We have pending new global OA program with the Ocean Decade that many of you have worked on with us. Next. And there are follow-up on existing voluntary commitments and encourage new submissions. And I think this will be the topic of kind of the last phase of this webinar that we're doing today. And I believe that's it. Next slide, please. Yeah, so with that, I just wanted to thank you for your attention and again, apologize for the technical hiccups, but very excited to work with all of you on shepherding these voluntary commitments along. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. And there has been, I think, fantastic progress in this field, and we'll have to move on to the next speaker. We're running a little late, and so one of the key aims, and Peter really mentioned this, is to promote building of collaborative networks to bring together local expertise and knowledge, and needing to tackle stresses in marine environment and ecosystems. And the next speaker, it's a pleasure to introduce Roshan Ramesur, who will present a talk on one of the critical developing regional networks in Africa. And Roshan is co-chair of the Ocean Acidification Network in Africa, and he's been a regional leader in this effort since it started. He's an associate professor at the University of Mauritius and leads an environmental coastal science research group. Thanks, Roshan.
Thank you, Bronte. Welcome everyone to this talk on OA Africa. But most of the speakers before me have already given you a background on how this voluntary commitments have been developed and progressing over the time since 2017 in Lisbon. So more or less, I will just go rapidly through some of the background, then I'll be focusing on the progress made on our voluntary commitments, especially for Africa, right? So you can see it was submitted, and you have this Ocean Action 3/2021, which exists on the web on the United Nations commitments on ocean acidification. And the background behind it, I will come to some of the progress which we've been doing over the past 2 years and reporting every year on the achievements which are being done. So more or less the major thing about our commitment was to make use of the COA-OA in a box, which contributes a lot on trying to achieve measuring pH and alkalinity, and trying to achieve the SDG goal 14.3. So under goal 14, this is the SDG indicator, which calls for the measurement of average marine acidity and so on. So move to the next one. It's there's a number of sampling stations around the world, but I'll be focusing mostly on as mentioned before by Kirsten, it's the IOC is the custodian agency for this indicator, and they've been developing the methodology and collecting the relevant ocean acidification data, which they are asked to collect from various countries. And obviously we have this data portal which exists, and there's a number of data sets which needs to be input in these in the various portals, in the various typologies, as mentioned by Catherine as well. So these kits were developed by a group of experts in ocean acidification under the coordination of IEA, OA ICC, together with the Ocean Foundation and its partners. And these are low-cost kits designed for measuring acidification in coastal surface waters. And to date, we have 17 laboratories in 12 different countries. They've received these kits donated by the Ocean Foundation, and these are to do with measurements and to observe ocean acidification with a hands-on training courses by experts. And obviously, Mauritius, Mozambique, Vietnam, and Fiji have been contributing over the past couple of years. Starting from 2017. And through various grants received from the Ocean Foundation, from the US State Department, IAEA, Ocean Acidification, ICC. So they've all been contributing in capacity building. And we see that global observations are crucially important to assess regional and local differences in the rate of change and to devise management and adaptation strategies. Obviously, with these kits, there are 3 categories as mentioned by Katerina, but we are mostly towards the category 2, which is mostly weather type data. Obviously, we're not category 3 because these are very small, simple instruments. But here we are measuring our data pH using the ISAMEs and spectrophotometric methods developed by Andrew Dixon, and so on. So these are our capacity building, which has been held over the past few years. So in the spotlight, we mentioned about communities. There are 9 community of ocean actions that exist, and I think Peter has already been going through all these, and the number of voluntary commitments which are there and who are contributing, like 240 contributing member organizations. So for us, we are focusing on implementation of the OA Africa, and we are part of this. And this report, I'm already upgrading or updating the commitments each year. Just recently we're trying to achieve, and I'll just go through some of the achievements which we've been focusing, especially in East Africa, but we are taking the whole of Africa as well, because we are including East, West, and North Africa, because we have colleagues in different African scientists working in the different regions, each of them at different levels, and so on. So, well, you can see that to achieve this target of 14.3, minimize and address the impacts of ocean acidification, including through enhanced scientific cooperation at all levels, and the related indicator 14.3.1, which is average marine acidity pH measured at a great suite of representative sampling stations. And throughout Africa, here in particular in East Africa, we see that countries, 6 countries are involved, funded by the IUC UNESCO WAMSA project. Of the next, I mean, we are ending our funding like till December 2021, but we started like 3 years back, and we are trying to share or try to collect the data and try to increase the capacity in terms of equipment acquisition and so on. And this will be contributing towards getting data sets for the region. So as you can see, we are most concerned with current declines in ocean assets, future population, economic growth, and we are a profound challenge to the blue economy's future in Africa. So as you can see that we have all the various observers go on involved. We're supported by a number of organizations, IUC, UNESCO, OA VCs, and Ocean Foundation. We're trying to the process of establishing the technical and human capacity for ocean acidification measurements in Africa. So we have just one platform which is currently registered in the East African region, measuring ocean acidification and delivering relevant data. And as I mentioned, we have these 6 projects which are contributing towards achieving this goal. So essential and regional local actions for OA Africa. We can see that international action, we are contributing towards that, and we need to have steps which are being taken, and this is part of our commitment, voluntary commitment, to monitor OA conditions in coastal waters to identify any potential hotspots or refugia, to share data through the global OA observing network, so that other nations in the regional and international level can learn from our situations. I mean, the data can also be used to meet the SDG 14.3, which mandates countries to provide data related to OA conditions. Also try to reduce local sources of acidification, if documented to be present and feasible, and to reduce other stresses to the marine environment, to enhance overall ecosystem resilience. I mean, all these were taken up in our white paper, which we submitted to the Nairobi Convention Science to Policy Dialogue meeting in this year, I mean, a month back. So I mean, I'm just going through some of the various measures that some of the various recommendations that we've been going through. So we have to protect natural carbon sinks such as seagrass beds and mangroves, identify flexible and resistant species for seafood production, and explore other seafood production options. So as you can see, I mean, the various steps that we've been achieving here. You can see a picture taken during the 11th WAMSA Symposium in Mauritius with WAMSA, members actually in Mauritius in July 2019, attending the OA special session. There you can see Sam Dupont here, and the various equipment trying to talk about the various methodologies which can be used in data collection. And OA Africa white papers have just been prepared under the IAEA, OA ICC, and West Africa, East Africa, and North Africa. We've been working with our colleagues in the various countries, and we have papers which have been co-authored by various principal investigators and also by colleagues in various East African or North African or West African institutions working towards ocean acidification. We were present during OA Week in terms of OA Africa promotion and awareness webinars in September 2020. I mean, these are the steps. You can see what we're doing. Some of the papers which have been presented. As I mentioned to you, the white papers will be finalized by IAEA. Hopefully, it will be extracted and published very soon by the IAEA. And I mean, obviously, we're trying to get a common paper out of that. We have certain common sections, but there will be sections specifically to different countries in the African region. We are encouraging postgraduate research in OA, in African universities and institutions. At the University of Mauritius, we have MPhil PhD student undertaking research in OA using our ISAMIs. I mean, we're also involving a number of undergraduate students. I mean, 4 or 5 like that. I guess in Kenya, South Africa, in Mozambique, in Tanzania, Seychelles as well. I mean, there are students postgraduate, and I know there are students who have already got the PhDs, like Carla in South Africa, working in the OA. I mean, whether it's full observations or equipment, or, in terms of biological or chemical experiments and so on. And recently, we contributed a case study to the policy handbook, which was launched just recently, I think a couple of weeks back, under the Commonwealth Charter Action Group. And we also worked in our OA steering committee, which we meet every fortnight, I mean, every 2 months rather, where we developed we developed the OA Africa Hub on the Ocean Acidification Information Exchange platform, and we are trying to push that forward, try to involve a number of African scientists, because we know we all have a number of scientists working in this region. We can make use of this platform because this is a very useful one where you can discuss, meet experts in various other regions working together and so on. I mean, I know that there's the COA toolkit as well going with discussions. So you can see the ISAMIs here. We're collecting data from sunburst sensors, which we already have 3 immersions at the moment. We're deploying these equipment in the lagoons and the coastal waters, and we have a team working with us. And hopefully, I know South Africa has been deploying with Dave's team in already and so on, and even Kenya with Eric, and Tanzania and Mozambique as well. And even Seychelles, Jerome Harley, I mean, has been working on a number of the data during, even for the Nansen cruise. I guess they've been contributing on this. So we hopefully we are working on these data sets, pH and alkalinity, and we're trying to make use of some of these parameters. We'll have to calculate some of the parameters to be able to bring, and hopefully to share these with our colleagues in Africa. So these are challenges which are we're looking at the moment. It's mostly the lockdown. Sometimes the coastal waters, the coastal regions are closed, and I mean, we do have some problems sometimes in collecting data in the field, because some people are not allowed to go on the coast to get these. So the beneficiaries of this OA Africa will be the OA community, of course, and we can see that we'll encourage OA workshops and conferences, capacity building and networking, and this is all being discussed at our steering committee level, where we meet. I mean, we're creating one for South Africa at the moment, and we already have the East Africa, the North Africa, and the West Africa steering committee and members who are meeting every 6 weeks to discuss the various types of projects or implementation in terms of technical capacities and how we develop things. So as you can see, submitting this commitment is a very important step in achieving this to get recognition, and hopefully our voluntary commitment will be upgraded as soon as we go along, because this is we have to submit our progress reports, and we are already in a good track as I guess. And obviously, you can see that I'm very thankful to the OAICC and IUC UNESCO for organizing this webinar. And as you can see, we will have to maybe add on to new commitments to the committees of action, ocean action, that address this SDG 14.3. So thank you very much for me. I'd like to welcome any questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roshan. Unfortunately, we're already out of time, and
Yes.
we'll have to miss questions for now. But if you do have questions, feel free to post them or to email Kirsten Asensi, who has an email address on the chat box, and they'll be up. And apologise for that. Now, we just want one last speaker, very brief. Trevor Reeks, who's a project officer at the IAEA laboratory in Monaco, wants to talk on some questionnaire that he asked some of the voluntary commitment providers to give some responses on some issues that they've come up against. Trevor, are you?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Bronte. I'm just trying to share my camera now. Okay, so I'm just going to go into this. You've heard these great talks from some of the leaders in our community about their experiences working on ocean acidification and the threats it poses. And now I would like to just read a few responses that we received from our questionnaire about VC updates. These are the voluntary commitments that you can submit online to the Communities of Ocean Action, and I highly recommend doing so for your organization or speaking with colleagues about this, because it's a great way to show the work that you've been doing and promote your work while demonstrating that there is a lot of action being done to address ocean acidification. So thank you to those who responded from the survey. We received several responses. I'm not going to be able to read them all because of the time limitation, but just want to recognize the SOCAT community, that is the Surface Ocean CO2 Atlas, and their work on synthesizing activity for quality controlled surface ocean FCO2, which is extremely important to the OA community. Last year they have over 30 million in situ surface ocean measurements at high accuracy. And they are well on track to release the next version, 2021 version of SOCAT this June. Some of the challenges that we've seen are the few ocean CO2 observations that have been made last year. With many of the research cruises canceled, it's difficult to maintain these platforms, and the scientists working from home have had increased workloads. I think many of us know what they're talking about, and sustained funding and international agreements for doing these measurements continues to be an issue. Also want to recognize the OA Africa network, and they've seen their network expand, and continuing research on the Wyomza project, which is the Western Indian Ocean monitoring and observation project, and doing a webinar and in-person and remote events based in Monrovia to promote ocean acidification awareness. Also presenting a OA white paper for East Africa at the Nairobi Convention SPD 2021 meeting, and as well as just building up their community and being more active. The Mediterranean Hub for GOA-ON similarly has been very active. They have currently 57 members. They've been working to submitted a cost proposal and have been developing different capacity building activities, such as being featured in the HLPF 2020 during the side event, developing capacity to address ocean acidification. The Ocean Alliance, you guys have already heard from them, over 100 members across 16 countries, and they've been making a lot of contributions to the community as well, doing national OA action plans, supporting those, contributing to the climate change dialogue at UNFCCC, and as well as doing a variety of other workshops. And finally, the Ocean Foundation has been very successful over the last year with getting more than 150 scientists to trainings hosted by the Ocean Foundation and the Ocean Alliance to learn about advanced science-based policy and management through collaboration between scientists and governments. And I think some of the themes that we saw is that funding constraints, especially with the COVID crisis and demands on our time, adapting to the virtual space as we've had to do here, and all of the technical and logistical challenges that poses. So it's really impressive to see how these organizations have responded and remained active in the work. You can see that the OA ICC, our organization, has updated its voluntary commitments online, as has the IOC, and you can check that out at Communities of Ocean Action, which we will be sending out in our post-talk email to all of the attendees. So without further ado, thank you all so much for coming. I hope these talks have been very informative and giving you some ideas about getting involved and possibly submitting your own voluntary commitments on ocean action. And so thankful for all of the great speakers who participated. Just want to say have a great week, everyone. Thank you again. Stay safe and take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. And so this brings to the end of the webinar, and I wanted to also thank people. We've seen a great development in willingness of different groups, institutions, programs, individuals to cooperate to promote ocean acidification. And it's growing as people recognise the importance of it to marine ecosystems. So anyway, thank you again for joining. If you have questions, please email Kirsten Asensi at IOC, and we will make sure that, there's Kirsten, we'll make sure that the questions are answered. There have been a couple in the question box. They will be, there've been small responses to those. Again, apologies for the difficulties with connections, but it happens in this world at present. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Okay, everyone.
Hey, goodbye.
Goodbye.